bring it back up. Oh, thanks, Ellie, for recording. And wanted to start just to hear from a couple of people. We have talked to a lot in developing this, but around one of the challenges is, how people determine what they measure, and it being what you report on is predetermined by someone else. And so if anyone, I see a lot of nods. So if anyone wanted to just unmute and share, like, who's determining what you measure? Is there a funder? Is it, the business case that you have to make that you're always, trying to report on? So if anybody wants to just share a little bit about your current state of like what you measure, how that's determined. All right, Christy is saying, as an LLC, mostly sales and profit margin. I see some nods around that. What about anybody that is in the USDA? Ellie, good.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say too that if it's unrestricted funding, it's your own personal or organizational values and objectives, which is great. It's the sweet spot to be in. But then again, I'm sure everything else is 100% funders or bottom line if you're in the market world.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that for a lot of people, is what you have to report, and then you have your own values and things you want to capture. And share. Angela sharing product quantity, number of families fed. I think that's a common one too, in planning for crop planning. Stacy, that's cool. You get to decide what to track and report. So
I wish that there were more folks actually asking for this, because it's also really interesting having been on the like funded side where you have a funder that's like, give me all these metrics and implementing that. But being on the flip side where you are the funder and none of your executive are actually asking is a whole other experience.
Yeah, and this is common of what we've seen from other folks, is that your metrics and how you evaluate is predetermined. Oh, Todd, you want to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say that like funding for a lot of our work now has moved towards more general funding, general purpose grants and things like that. Much because of I think that the funders realized after the Gray Uprising, the riots, and all the kinds of things that have been happening with respect to racial justice and whatnot, that a lot of funders have moved in this direction of like not holding groups accountable for like specific measures, not being so hardcore about them. From the pandemic, also just the pressures that was putting on organizations. So we see a lot more general purpose. So we're able to actually be able to identify benefits and to be able to identify metrics that we feel like are important to pay attention to. And so we find a more receptive audience on the other side of the table also for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you're able to define some of that. Anybody else?
This is Angela. Because we're a small urban grower, we also track for how much we lose due to pests, as well as the animals that may just wander in who may be hungry. And in New Orleans now, we're having an influx of possum that are coming in from the wetlands. And so that destruction may seem small and a nuisance, but it's a cost that's associated to us in urban areas. And so we're starting to track what that cost is to us from those pests that are migrating in from the wetlands, along with all the other pests that we have to be concerned with just in everyday urban ag. To go outside and see a possum just eating away at your crops is, first of all, scary. And then secondly, we realize that we've created a habitat as well for the possum, but cats are one thing, but possums are something else. And it's not really, Miles, I see you're laughing, but until you see a possum staring you down like this is some good eggplant and I'm not giving it up right now, but it's a cost that we have to incur and that we're starting to look at more frequently now here in the urban setting.
Yeah, thanks. I hadn't thought of that one, lost to possums, but experience, critter theft in my own garden. And I know that's, so it's important to track that so you can share it with whoever you need to and to plan for it financially. Yeah. Susan also had to run it. I guess possums are really invading down there.
Yeah, they are. And they are, all the plant advocates are saying, well, they eat ticks. Well, I don't have ticks in my garden.
Well, thanks. So what you shared all speaks to why we developed this evaluation guide that we created, really to help people develop an evaluation plan that's in line with your values. And it's a shift in how we see value creation, value coordination work at the Wallace Center. Over the past 10 years, that's shifted from purely a business perspective to value chain coordination being a way to fulfill your values and to create a broader impact than just moving pounds of food. So overall, I think some of you are also seeing shifts like Todd with the funders and others that are including values in addition to the USDA or the other required metrics that show performance maybe, but don't really align with values or maybe the direction you want to go. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll give an overview of this tool that you will be beta testing. So like Ellie said before, there'll be a chance to use this after. Sorry, I'm just getting this going. All right, can you see this slideshow?
Yep.
Here we go.
Yeah, now we can see just the slide.
Okay, so the value chain coordination evaluation guide was developed over the past year and a half, really, by the Wallace Center with input from partners through an LFPP project that we're leading. So we had some other consultants and university leaders sharing their input, as well as value chain practitioners sharing the results, what they're measuring. And so that's all gone into it. And the guide has prompts for you to work through. It's information, it's things that you're already thinking about, but this will help to organize your thoughts and what you know about your work and where you want it to go to feed that into an evaluation plan. So it starts with your why or your values and then ends with metrics. And so the work is really linking those together. And just the steps that are in it, in the guide, which is a kind of a worksheet that you'll be able to go through, is just confirming, like listing out what are the values that inform my work and that I want to achieve through my value chain coordination work. And then seeing how those values link to your strategy, to the way that you're doing it. And then getting more specific to the roles that you're doing in value chain coordination, which I'll show on the next slide, but there's specific ways that you can operate, and that will inform the impact you have is based on the roles. And then there's levels of impact, right? There's like immediate short term that you want to measure, like the number of calls that you make or pounds of food moved. And then you can get into longer term things that take time and are more difficult to measure and are more difficult to control, but you still want to try to capture those so you can share the big picture and like the most important, in some ways, aspects of the work. So the worksheet gives you a chance to think about all of that and all those different levels and keep it organized. And from there, there's an evaluation template that you can fill out that's got, I'll just show you. It's easier just to show you. So the guide starts out, there's fields you can fill in. It has some background information, and then this is an example of the values section, just to prompt to fill those out and reflect on them. And also throughout, there are prompts around racial equity on how that's included in your values in your work, or if not, it's a chance to include it and see the direct ties to that, to your value chain coordination work. So from, like I said, from the guide, then you'll get there's another, basically a spreadsheet. That's an evaluation tool. And this is something hopefully that you can use to quickly build an evaluation plan based on the best practices in the field. Like we know everyone's busy and some people aren't. No one's asking you to do this in depth of a plan, but it's something that's important to you to capture your work. So we want to make this as quick as possible to build on what's already out there. So this is, again, developed based on past value chain coordination projects with input from our advisors, and has been piloted in a basic format in Indiana with a small group. So the tool has 38 of the common metrics that we saw that people can pull. Like, we don't want you to use all of those. You select a couple of those to use in your own plan, or can even develop your own new ones. And yeah, we'll be the first group to try this out. So here's what the tool part looks like. So after the worksheet where you work on your values and all that, you come to this, which is the metrics. And this is just a snapshot of just the, see the role here. These are the metrics related to market matchmaking. So if you're doing that, you would look at this list and look at the metrics here and see which are aligned with your values, which makes sense for the role that you're performing, and select those and put those into the worksheet. So you would go through kind of back and forth between your notes and then the list that has all of them. And that, oh, where's my, oh, I lost a slide. Hold on. I don't know why it's not showing, but so this is an example filled out of the tool. So it's got, you can see under the role, these are all different roles. So it's one around convening stakeholders, if that's something you're doing, and that's a hard thing to measure. And this is one where one metric is number of introductions made. And then for each metric, there's a level of change. So this would be more of an output, like something that you're creating through your work directly. And then through that, you can enter your baseline number, a goal, and then we went with a 1 year in the template. You can change it to whatever time frame is relevant, enter data after 1 year. So this is just an example that I filled out. So the next row is on fostering and maintaining relationships. And that the metric is around long-term partners that are participating in value chain coordination, which would have to be defined, further by your site. And again, just trying to set a baseline and then see what happens over the year. Gross sales we know is going to be there for this work, so that's included. There's also in this further column how racial equity is addressed within each metric, so it's as a prompt, and where there was a tie that we could put, or a question that's in there. So here's a share of sales to BIPOC owned businesses. I won't go through all of these. The rest are on market matchmaking. The bottom one is one that came up in our research as a good proxy or a substitute for sales, but for if you're helping businesses, helping farmers, or helping other customers, and they're not going to give sales numbers away to an external party. That's hard to get, but you could talk about or ask if they had any innovations in their products or processes. So that's something people could share outside of their sales. And that would just be following up with people that came to a training or came to an event to see if they did change anything in their work, and that could be a sign that they're on an upward trajectory. Are there any questions on this before I close this slide?
Andrew, this is going to sound like I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but would it be helpful to remind folks the difference between an output, an outcome, and an impact here? I think, is it in the worksheet?
Yeah, I'll pull up the worksheet.
I have it open too, if that helps.
Okay. Yeah, so can you still see my screen with the?
Just the slide.
Oh, okay, let me switch this. Yeah, well, see, I made this over the summer, which is still now, but it feels like it's been a while. So I want to read these. I didn't want to like do it off the cuff. So an output is like a count from your activities. You can see this now. Okay. So an output is a count from your activities, like number of introductions, number of attendees at an event, which is important to know, like if people are interested in the work and if it's having that immediate impact, and also to see if you can follow through and say that you made the difference if that happens out there in the world. Outcomes are effects of the output on the beneficiaries or partners. So it's of the people that were at an event, the number of business transactions that resulted from the introductions, or attendees that report they applied a lesson, applied something to their organization. So it's the next level out, which is a broader impact, but is also harder to measure and harder to capture. And then impact is progress towards a long-term goal, which could be an increased number of BIPOC-owned businesses, improved population health, reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Like they get bigger and bigger and harder to attribute to your work. But if you have thought through and have the logic of how your outputs lead to certain outcomes, lead to these impacts, then you can tie it together and tell that story. And Stacey, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for that. I find that one thing that is really helpful when I try and explain the difference here to others is that output metrics are about things you can track from what you do, and outcome metrics are often what do you want other people to do as a result of what you did. So for example, we can host a training and then the number of attendees that come to that training, that's an output, right? It's something I can kind of have a sense of. We called that meeting and then 20 people came. So that's an output metric. But then from that meeting, what do we want folks to do? What did we want them to learn and go off and implement? And what would we need to actually look at to see whether they've gone on and done something with that information? And that would be more of sort of an outcome of the work. So I like that has always been really clarifying for me. And if it's helpful for other folks too, we have this conversation all the time in our ministry about, I think there's a bias often towards output metrics because they're easier to track. But when you think through, okay, great, we hosted a training or a webinar, we brought folks together, like what do you hope happens as a result of that, right? And what might be some proxies, even if they're imperfect, to check back in with those folks about what they're doing with that, whatever you brought them together to do.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a great way of putting it, as the outcome is what you want someone else to do with that or what they do, and it's not your direct work anymore. All right, any other questions? Anybody else have an interpretation of this that's different? Okay, I think I need to reshare. I should have shared this a different way, but I'll put the last slide back up. Okay, do you see the double rainbow? Okay, so that's the quick story about what the evaluation guide is. We've developed it over the past year and a half, and now it's time to put it to the test and use it. And so we're looking for folks that want to do that between September and next February. And really, this is a chance to refine and revise your evaluation plans and to get more into get your values really reflected in your evaluation plan. And folks that participate in the pilot will get free support from myself or others at the Wallace Center in developing this plan and making it yours, as well as an honorarium for your time, recognizing that this is hopefully helping you in your work, but also you're doing us a favor in testing it. Yeah, and then be a part of developing this that will roll out even broader next year after this first phase. So we've got it kind of at this beta test, want to run through with some folks, and then we'll have a final version to share after that. And I think that's all the slides I wanted to share. So I want to see if there's any other questions, or if anybody is ready to sign up to test it.
I also shared the link to the webpage that has information about the framework, and then also a link to the worksheet and the tools as well, so you can fool around with those.
And I'll put my email here in the in the chat. You can follow up with me that way. The deadline, we'd like people to let us know by September, so that we can get started and have time to work through it together. And you know, thinking that over as we get started now and then over the winter, and hopefully maybe it's slower and people are doing this kind of like reflection on the past year and planning for the next year. But see, it's not just for nonprofits. We've developed it in mind with what we call, and here what we call transactional partners, as well as support. So transactional being the food hubs and more for-profits. So it could be for both. And Patty, if you don't track much, that's fine. Like this is a way to start a system. Like sometimes it's easier to start from scratch than to revise something. So you'd be welcome to do it. Yeah, and Todd, we can send the slides out first. Dude, that's the other question about federal grants metrics, and we have, and we also are grantees of the USDA, so we have dealt with that, and we're trying to do something different where this starts with what you want to measure and builds on that. So it's not dictating. It includes some like sales and other things that are part of the federal grant metrics, but it won't include all of those. Like that's something that you can fold into it. All right, good to see some interest. The honorarium, we'll have to follow up with you on that, Stacy, on whether it can be just to US participants.
Just seeing your comment here, Ashton, around trying to develop an evaluation plan for 3 full-time value chain coordinators. And I think starting off with this would probably be really helpful to like help them understand what you all are aiming for and help them contribute to its development too. That's cool.
Yeah, and especially for new positions or new roles like that as well, what we've found in our work in evaluation at the Wallace Center is that developing your evaluation plan is also developing your strategy, your like theory of change of how your work is influenced in the world. And if the more clear on that, the easier it is to develop your evaluation plan. And if it's not clear, then you'll have to work through it to get your plan clear. So it's good, definitely good to do at the start as well.
Another thing that I was going to say is, even if you're not like officially participating in the pilot, this is now a public resource out in the world. So even if you aren't necessarily able to adapt it and use it like officially on sort of our timeline, it is now, a resource that's available to anybody that's interested in fooling around with it. And even, if you're not officially participating in the pilot and you run into something that you're like, this doesn't make sense, or I think you should word this a different way, we're going to continue refining this tool because we want it to be something that's really useful to all of you and helps you really tell the story of the incredible work you're doing. So go wild.
Yeah, and you can sign up either. I'll put my name or my email back in. You can just send me a note. We'll also, as a follow-up, send out the page that Ellie mentioned that has a form you can submit. And we will get started in September. And I'll plan to put together a timeline for doing it that helps you to be accountable to it and work through it over time, as a suggested timeline. But we'll need to finish up next year to have it complete. But thank you for the interest. It's good to see folks want to try it out. And we'll walk through it together. We'll do some one-on-one and probably some group sessions as we all go through it. So I think, Ellie, if there's no other questions on this, then back to you.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you, Andrew, for all of the work and thought you put into this, and thanks everybody for being excited about it. It's like sort of a very wonky, nerdy thing, but it's also, I think, can be really powerful. So yeah, follow up with Andrew, take a look at the tool online, and let us know how it's going. So two little sort of housekeeping things that I wanted to wrap up with this afternoon is the first of which is that, as I mentioned, we are looking for facilitators and or topics for our September and October COP calls. So feel free to send me an email if you have an idea or want to help facilitate. We did this a little bit in the spring with a few COP members where we worked together on a facilitation plan, and it was really fun. And it also, you know, helped you all really take ownership of this group, which is one of the things that we're hoping, you know, continues to develop. So shoot me an email if you have an idea or want to help facilitate later in the fall. And another thing that we wanted to just put on y'all's radar screen, because I know it's really a hot topic these days, is the local food purchase assistance cooperative agreement. Those are getting signed and starting to get stood up all over the country. If you're not familiar with this program, USDA is giving out $400 million to state and tribal governments across the US to buy locally produced food, predominantly from socially disadvantaged producers, and then distribute it through partners to communities facing food insecurity. And a lot of these are the agreements are getting signed with state and tribal governments right now. And then there's just going to be a huge influx of money out into local and regional food systems, which is really exciting. But also, as we know, we were talking about unintended consequences earlier, there probably are going to be some. So we are standing up a program to both learn about how the LFPA is going, what the pitfalls are, what the best practices are, and also provide some technical assistance. And we're having a call next week to get a sense of what's going on the ground, what folks are learning, what they're seeing, what's working and what's not so far. And also to get a sense then of how we can best provide support through the Food Systems Leadership Network. So that call is next Tuesday at 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific. And the link to register is right here. And if you're not able to join that call, we are having just one-on-one conversations with people too, to learn about how this program is looking for people implementing it on the ground. We're really excited about the opportunity, and we also want to make sure that you all have the tools that you need to really make it transformational in your community. So that link is in the chat, and we'll also send it out in an email. And we'd love to see you there because we really want to hear what's going on and what we can help with. So yeah, September and October topics and LFPA call next week, and email Andrew if you would like to be part of this beta test for the evaluation plan. And I think that's it for us today, unless anybody has any other questions.
Ellie, this is Robert in Texas. I have a question for you.
Yeah,
You just gave a kind of a rundown on the LFPA stuff. I'm curious, what do y'all know or have heard recently about the regional business enterprise centers? Is that going to happen? Is that still a magical mystery tour, or what is it?
It's definitely going to happen. It might also be a magical mystery tour. So USDA has said that they are staffing up to start rolling out that program, and that there is an RFA that should be coming out imminently. I don't have a ton more details about like timeline or specifics there. It's all been pretty under wraps for the last few months as far as I know, but it's happening. It seems like those, you know, are gonna be real. And again, yeah, Virginia thinks they were hired. They posted a job description for someone to run the program in USDA a few months ago. So yeah, it's definitely coming. Susan, I don't know if you have any other details.
Yeah, they hired the branch chief and their first day was yesterday. So, I mean, it seems like if they already started, then it's okay to say it's Kate Fitzgerald got the job, who many of us know and love. And Kate is a longtime advocate of local and regional food systems, is a policy expert, has been, you know, involved in this work for a really long time. So that's a really positive development. They're also going to be staffing up. I understand they're going to be placing one USDA AMS staffer at each of the regional centers, which will be somewhat of like an AMS extension service, which is interesting. I've heard that there will be 13 centers, but don't quote me on that. And I think that the RFA, so the request for applications for those centers, is being like finalized right now. So we should expect it, you know, within this quarter, I would expect. So a lot of organizing for us to do, but it's hard to do until we actually see the RFA and know what it is that we should be organizing for.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Robert. It's definitely another big USDA opportunity, and I certainly have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we're certainly pleased by Kate's positioning there. She's an ex coworker of mine at the Department of Ag for many years.
Oh yeah. Nice. Cool. Well, we'll keep sharing what we learn about that as more information rolls out. And yeah, hopefully we'll see an RFA soon and get more info from USDA so we can figure out how to make those things really work for us.
The other intel that I've gotten recently is that AMS is going through a little bit of a restructuring of the kind of local and regional food systems team to where there will be the regional food business centers, outreach and technical assistance, and research. And each of those has a branch chief, and they're united in their efforts around the local and regional food systems transformation work. So I think it's a positive development in terms of like internal structuring. I think they're going to be coming out with more information about what that actually looks like. But I understand that Samantha Shaftstall, who's also someone that y'all might have had some interface with, is now the branch chief for the outreach and technical assistance. And Samantha is awesome. And I can't remember, Ellie, did they say who's on the research? Ashley Chaffetz, who also has had a lot of interface with different groups over the last couple of years. So I think these, you know, promotions and restructuring and stuff, I think is going to bode well for our work in the coming years. But it's right now, I don't think they've really come out with information. And that's one of the requests that we had in a recent meeting with them, is like, you guys need to really like put all this in a very clear communication so that folks can understand what's going on.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. We will see you again. Let me get the date. September. It's the third Tuesday of the month. So that would be September. Oh, it's not on the calendar, y'all. I believe it's the 20th of September, but we'll be sure to reach out before then to make sure you all are ready to go and giving an update about what we'll be talking about ahead of that call as well. And have a wonderful end to the summer, everybody. I feel like I need to get in a lot more swimming time before it cools off a little bit here. And we really appreciate you and hope to hear from you all soon. And we'll see you in a few weeks. Take care, y'all. Thank you.